At my husband's cousin's wedding party that I paid for, I found myself assigned to the kids' table with no meal. His sister chuckled, "You should be grateful you're even invited." I gently placed my champagne glass down. Minutes later, a waiter handed me the $9,200 bill, with my husband's signature missing. I wish I could say it all unraveled in one big, dramatic moment. That would have been easier. Cleaner. But the truth is, it was slow. Like water wearing down stone. You barely notice until there's a hole you can't patch. Julian and I had been married almost 4 years when this happened. We met at a charity art gala in Manhattan. He was there for the architecture firm he worked for, and I was there because my brokerage had sponsored the wine. He was charming. Reserved. The kind of man who'd listen before speaking. Who knew obscure facts about French design and made them sound romantic somehow. We dated for almost 2 years before getting married. I was already established, mid-30s, no kids, fresh off a tough divorce. I had built my career from the ground up, late nights, impossible clients, deals that barely closed, and some that never did. But I had finally made it. I owned my own apartment in Hell's Kitchen. Had a Roth IRA I didn't fully understand, and a closet of blazers that said I don't need to marry for money. Julian, on the other hand, came from a quieter kind of wealth. His family had a historic home in Connecticut, complete with a hedge maze that no one maintained anymore. They weren't flashy. They weren't loud. But they had money. Trusts. Lawyers. Generational things I didn't fully understand. Still, we clicked. At first, his family was polite. Cold, but polite. His sister Clarice was the worst. She had this way of complimenting me that always felt like a slap. "It's so impressive that you work in real estate. That must be so intense. I don't think I could handle clients yelling at me." Or "Wow, that handbag is very practical. I love that you're not into labels." Julian always brushed it off. "That's just how she is," he'd say. "She's sarcastic." But sarcasm feels different when you're always the target. Things shifted gradually after the wedding. I noticed I was always the one paying for things. "Babe, I'll Venmo you later," he'd say after dinner with his family. Or, "Can you just put it on your card? My trust account needs a few days to clear." It didn't feel like a big deal at first. I made good money. I loved him. What's mine is yours, right? Then came the wedding. Not ours, his cousin Genevieve's. Genevieve was the family darling. Young, beautiful, newly engaged to some hedge fund kid from Greenwich. They were planning the wedding of the year, and the whole Ferraro family was buzzing like it was a royal coronation. Julian came home one night, set down his keys, and said, "So, Genevieve's venue fell through. Her parents are kind of freaking out." I was chopping vegetables at the kitchen island. "Okay? They're asking if we could help." "Just a little. Maybe you could take over planning? You're so good with this stuff." I stared at him. "You mean pay for it?" "No," he said too quickly. "I mean, not all of it. Just coordinate, maybe cover deposits. I'll talk to my parents. We'll all contribute." I didn't say yes that night. But a week later, after a group dinner where Genevieve teared up over a glass of Merlot about how devastated she was, I found myself agreeing. I had vendor contacts. Negotiation skills. And yeah, I wanted to show them I belonged. For the next 4 months, I handled everything. The venue, an oceanside estate in Montauk. The florist, $4,000 worth of hydrangeas and white roses. The live band. The custom cocktail menu. The personalized welcome bags for each guest, filled with organic snacks and mini sunscreen bottles with the couple's initials. I wrote the checks. Every single one. Julian said he'd talked to his parents about reimbursements, but nothing ever came of it. Still, I told myself it was fine. I was helping family. This was an investment in my marriage. A gesture of goodwill. The night of the wedding, I wore an emerald green silk dress. One I'd bought from a boutique in Soho months ago and never found the right occasion for. I had my hair done, makeup subtle but elegant. I felt confident. Like I'd earned my seat at the table. But when we arrived, I noticed Julian drifting away immediately, hugging cousins, laughing with uncles, disappearing into the crowd like vapor. I found the usher, gave him my name, and he flipped through a clipboard. "Oh. Table 12, he said. I looked. It was tucked near the kitchen entrance. There were 4 children sitting there. 2 of them were already smearing frosting into the tablecloth. A teenage girl scrolled on her phone with her headphones in. One seat was still empty, mine. I stood there, stunned. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't even angry yet. Just confused. I walked over and sat down slowly, careful not to wrinkle my dress. My place setting didn't have a name card. No plated salad. No wine glass. Just a paper napkin and a plastic cup. Clarice passed by moments later. She paused, glanced at me, then smirked. "You should be grateful you're even invited." Then walked away like she hadn't just gutted me. I sat there, still, as kids screamed around me and the servers danced past me without stopping. Then came the waiter. He was maybe 22, nervous. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, holding a clipboard. "Just need a final signature on the catering balance." I took the clipboard. The total was $9,200. Julian's name was printed neatly at the bottom, but the signature line was blank. I stared at it. "He was supposed to," I started. "I was told you're the point of contact," the waiter said gently. I didn't speak. Just reached into my clutch, took out my pen, and signed. When I looked up, Clarice was watching from across the room. She raised her glass toward me with a grin. I set my champagne down on the table. Carefully. Quietly. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't a wedding. This was an unveiling. A slow, agonizing unmasking of the life I thought I had. And the people I had trusted. After the signature, the waiter gave a quick nod and walked off, probably to feed the 200 guests who did get actual meals. I just sat there. Watching. The music, the chatter, the clinking of silverware, it all seemed distant, like I was underwater. No one noticed me missing from the main tables. No one asked why I wasn't with Julian. In fact, Julian hadn't even looked my way since the cocktail hour. I scanned the crowd and spotted him laughing with one of Genevieve's uncles near the bar. He had a drink in his hand. Probably his third. I remember thinking, he doesn't even know where I'm sitting. I got up from the kids' table, not dramatically, not with any intention to make a scene, and walked out to the terrace that overlooked the water. It was early June, warm with a salty breeze, and everything about the view was beautiful. But it felt wasted on a moment like that. I pulled out my phone. Not to call anyone. Just to look busy. Just to not cry. About 10 minutes later, Julian finally found me. He was flushed from the alcohol, tie loosened, still holding his glass. "There you are," he said, like I'd just wandered off for fun. "Everything okay?" I turned to face him. "Where am I sitting, Julian?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "My table. Do you know where they put me?" He shrugged. "I figured with your name on the guest list, they'd have you with the table 12, I interrupted. "With 4 children and a teenager who doesn't speak." He laughed like it was absurd. "Seriously? You didn't check the seating plan?" "Babe, I wasn't involved in the final layout stuff. That was Genevieve's planner, I think." "You mean me?" "I was the planner, remember?" He paused, sensing the edge in my voice now. "Okay, look, I didn't think, that's the problem," I said. "You didn't think. I paid for this wedding. I coordinated it. I paid your family's debts. I put my name and reputation on the line with every vendor. And I'm sitting with children while Clarice mocks me. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even angry in that moment. I was just clear. For the first time in a long time. You know, I just signed off on a $9,200 catering bill? I added. Your name was on it. But the signature line was empty. His eyebrows drew together. That's weird. I thought I signed that. You didn't. You didn't even know where I was seated. Do you know what Clarice said to me? He didn't respond. She said I should be grateful I was even invited. There was a pause. Finally, he said, look, this isn't the time or place to have this conversation. Of course it's not, I replied. Because if it were, you'd have to actually be present in it. I left him standing there and walked back inside. But I didn't return to table 12. I found an empty stool near the bar and ordered sparkling water. I watched the rest of the evening unfold like a play I wasn't cast in. Toasts were made. Tears were shed. The couple kissed under fairy lights. I clapped when others did. Smiled when necessary. Julian didn't come back. And I didn't seek him out. Later that night, back at the hotel, he acted like nothing had happened. He was tipsy, affectionate. Crawled into bed and fell asleep like it was just another night after another event. But I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the whole day in my head. The dress. The drive. The guest list I had personally organized. The invoices. The flowers. The seating chart. I had been erased from my own labor. The next morning, Julian was gone by the time I woke up. Left a note that he was grabbing coffee with his dad. I packed my things slowly, methodically. Put the receipts in a folder I had brought just in case. Not for confrontation. Just for records. I didn't speak to anyone at brunch. I made my goodbyes, hugged Genevieve, smiled at her new husband. Clarice waved at me from across the room, not even bothering to come closer. Julian finally returned as I was getting into the car. I'll ride back with my parents, he said casually. See you at home? I just nodded. The drive back was silent. And heavy. I wish I could say I was heartbroken. But it was something quieter than that. More insidious. It was the kind of ache that doesn't scream. It just whispers, you don't belong here. I spent that week quietly pulling together every record. Every receipt. Every transfer. I contacted the vendors to make sure all final payments were documented in my name. The wedding photographer had tagged me on Instagram, thanks to the amazing Alyssa for coordinating such a beautiful day. I screenshotted it. I also started making a backup of all shared financials. Julian had never taken interest in the money. That was the one thing I had full control over. He came home late every night that week. Claimed work was crazy. Didn't notice I was quieter. Or maybe he did and didn't want to ask. By Friday, I had a folder on my desktop titled Exit Strategy. And a number saved in my phone, a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had gone through something similar. Still, I hadn't said anything yet. I wasn't ready. Not quite. But the veil had lifted. And I was seeing everything clearly now. That following Sunday, I was summoned, to a Ferraro family dinner at Julian's parents' estate in Fairfield. It was described as just a casual thing, but with the Ferraros, nothing ever really was. Julian insisted I come. It'll be low-key, he said. We'll eat, talk, decompress after the wedding. Decompress. Interesting word, coming from a man who hadn't lifted a finger during the most chaotic event his family had ever hosted. I arrived a little after 6. The estate was glowing in the early evening sun, all manicured hedges and ivy-covered brick. From the outside, it looked serene. But walking through the front doors always felt like stepping onto a stage. No script. No direction. Just a guarantee you were being watched. Clarice was already there, lounging on a cream-colored sectional like she owned oxygen itself. Julian was talking with his father in the study. I barely got a nod when I walked in. Dinner was served promptly at 6:30. Roasted duck, sautéed asparagus, a saffron risotto that was probably flown in from Milan. Their housekeeper, Dahlia, had been working since morning. She greeted me with a soft pat on the arm when I walked into the dining room. The only genuine touch I'd feel all night. The table was long, ornate, overly set. I sat beside Julian's mother, Ingrid, who smiled thinly and then launched into a story about Genevieve's honeymoon plans. I noticed she didn't ask me about the wedding. Not a single question about the vendors. Not a thank you. Nothing. Clarice, of course, picked up where Ingrid left off. It was so tasteful, wasn't it? Genevieve was just radiant. And the floral arches, oh, so romantic. Julian raised his glass. To a perfect night. I stared at him. He didn't glance at me. I waited for someone, anyone, to acknowledge that I had planned the entire thing. Paid for most of it. Stepped in when no one else would. Silence. It wasn't just omission. It was erasure. Midway through dinner, Clarice turned to me and said, "By the way, the seating thing, I hope you weren't too bothered. There was some kind of mix-up. I think the planner was overwhelmed." I blinked. I was the planner. I looked at Julian. He glanced down at his plate. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was engineered. Designed to remind me of my place. Actually, I said, calmly, there was no mix-up. I was deliberately placed at the kids' table. Clarice cocked her head, mocking surprise. Oh? That can't be right. Genevieve would never. She didn't, I said. You did. The table fell quiet. Ingrid gave a polite little laugh. Now, let's not turn this into drama. It was a wedding. Things get hectic. I turned to her. Ingrid, did you know I covered the catering? The venue? The musicians? Over $9,000 just for that day? She looked stunned. Not because of the number, but because I'd said it out loud. Julian set down his fork. Alyssa, this isn't the time. I didn't look at him. It's exactly the time. Clarice put her napkin on her lap, smiling like she was watching a show. Well, it was your choice, wasn't it? No one asked you to do all that. I was asked, I replied evenly. Repeatedly. Julian said it would be temporary. Said the family would pitch in. I've yet to see a single dollar. Julian's father cleared his throat. Money between family, it's not polite to bring that to the table. I turned to him. It becomes relevant when that family intentionally excludes you from the table you paid to set. Julian leaned forward, now visibly irritated. What are you trying to do here? I looked him dead in the eye. I'm trying to get you to look at me. He didn't. That dinner lasted another 40 minutes. No one addressed what I said again. It was smoothed over with fake laughs and forced stories. But the mood had shifted. Not tension, more like unease. Like they could sense I wasn't playing the same role anymore. After dessert, lavender panna cotta, of course, Julian followed me out to the car. He didn't speak at first. Just stood beside the driver's door, rubbing the back of his neck. Finally, he said, "You ambushed them." I told the truth. He shook his head. "You embarrassed me." I stared at him. I was seated at the kids' table, Julian. After paying for a wedding your family couldn't afford. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. I got in the car. Didn't say goodbye. Drove off with my knuckles tight around the wheel and my heart somewhere between fury and resolve. Back home, I went to the guest room and shut the door. He didn't come to check on me. Didn't even knock. That week, I spoke to the divorce attorney. Told her everything. Gave her the records. She said, "This will be easy. You've been financially exploited." "They'll deny it, but your documentation is gold." I didn't file yet. But I was close. Julian still hadn't brought up the dinner. Or the wedding. Or anything. But Clarice did. She sent a text 2 days later, "Just so you know, Genevieve's best friend is getting married next spring. She was impressed by the wedding. I passed on your info. Hope you're not still touchy about the table thing, lol." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to my attorney. "Add this to the file," I wrote. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I waited. Not out of indecision, not because I was second-guessing. I waited because I wanted everything lined up. Just right. While Julian wandered through our apartment like nothing had happened, I was quietly assembling my final act. There's something about being underestimated that becomes fuel. They thought I was just some outsider lucky to marry in. That I should feel honored to be part of their world. But they had no idea that I was always 3 steps ahead. The final push came during a random Thursday evening. I came home from a late showing with a client and found Julian in the living room with his laptop and a glass of scotch. "We need to talk," I said, calmly. He didn't look up. "Now?" "Yes." He closed the laptop, sat back, and gave me that half smile he always used when he thought I was being emotional. "It used to work. Not anymore. I've decided to file for divorce," I said plainly. The smile dropped. "What?" "I've hired an attorney. Everything is documented. You'll receive the paperwork next week." He leaned forward, stunned. "Wait, hold on. This is over the wedding? Over the table?" "It's over everything. The lies. The manipulation. Your family's entitlement. The fact that you let them treat me like hired help and said nothing. You're being irrational." "No," I said. "I'm being done." He stood up, raising his voice. "So what, you're just going to walk away from everything we built?" I looked around the room. "Everything I built? You mean this apartment? Paid for by my income? Or the wedding your family couldn't afford that I covered and was disrespected for?" He opened his mouth but had no argument. Just that same blank expression he gave me the night of the wedding. "You've had the luxury of being passive while I did the heavy lifting," I added. "But passivity is still a choice. And you chose your silence." Then I walked away and left him standing there. A week later, the papers were served. No drama. No screaming. Just a courier in a navy windbreaker handing him an envelope. He didn't contest. Probably because he knew the documentation was airtight. Or maybe because he never really fought for anything, not even me. The revenge wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It came in the form of consequences. I kept the apartment. I got back the money I spent on the wedding, every dollar. My attorney presented such a thorough paper trail that even Julian's family's legal team couldn't spin it. The judge awarded me reimbursement for all non-marital financial contributions made under false pretenses. Clarice, of course, caught wind of the outcome. I know because she posted a thinly veiled rant on Facebook about gold diggers and bitter women who pretend to be victims. She never named me, but it was clear. I didn't engage. I didn't have to. But I did see to it that Genevieve's best friend, the one who wanted to hire me for her wedding, was fully informed. I sent her a brief, professional message explaining that while I appreciated the interest, I no longer offer planning services to clients associated with the Ferraro family. I included a few screenshots of texts between Julian, Clarice, and myself, the tone, the gaslighting, the jokes at my expense. She replied 2 hours later. "Wow. I had no idea. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'll find someone else." And just like that, another door quietly shut on their social influence. Months passed. Julian reached out once. A single email that read, "I didn't realize how much I took for granted. I hope you're doing well." I didn't reply. Because I was doing well. I sold the apartment and moved upstate to Beacon. Bought a cottage with a garden and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Started hosting small dinner parties with people who remembered to ask me how I was doing. No backhanded compliments. No passive-aggressive jabs. No transactional relationships. Just peace. And clarity. Sometimes, I still think about that wedding. About the kids' table. About Clarice's smirk. But I don't feel anger anymore. I feel satisfaction. Because revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it's signing your name at the bottom of a bill that they thought you'd eat in silence, then mailing it back to them with interest. And sometimes, it's just leaving. Quietly. Powerfully. Completely. And never, ever returning.